Right, early West Indies, my mom have only three children. First one was a girl, and she died. And then fortunately, I become the eldest of my father married. The second time, I have about 10 other uncles and about 7 brothers, and the rest is sisters. We grew up very happy in the West Indies. My father is a farmer, and we independent, never work for anyone. After school, I did have a bad limb feet, and it stopped me from carrying further. So after when it get better, I decided to go and learn trade. And
Whereabouts do you learn that?
I start learn trade in Westmoreland with Carlo.
Is that in Jamaica?
In Jamaica, at little place where we call Landale out Savannah. That was my first experience with choil and mixing cement. And I worked around there until get a bit old. I decided to branch out and go into Kingston. After work, live and work there for a while, find a nice girl who seems to be interested. So I take her back down to Dad. And the day when I got on with her, I said to myself, you know, we always have this fear of our appearance, like, and respect. You don't want to barge in with a girl. But anyway, I have nice data with her. So I got on and I said to them, I didn't say much. All I done is leave her. My dad was going to bush and he never got there. So I said to my younger brother, she take it. You know, once, we call him Mandy. So once Mandy doesn't go to bush and stop with her, and he makes her and cook for her, did he? So I know she was willing. Anyway, we did married, and then after in Kingston, bought about 2 different houses, and we did have a little shop where she started work, do fry fish, fritters, and everything. But the grocery shop, there was nothing in it. It was just, you know, just to keep her, I think, from idling like. But anyway, we move and go further halfway through where we buy a next property, and I was doing a corresponding course from the Bennett College. I'm building engineer. So at all the exam them, it's usually cost me 3 pence a week to correct the lessons, send them back. And they take 21 days to correct and come back. And I was doing well, but to my knowledge, I never know what cavity wall is. So
that's in your building work?
That's in building, you see. Well, quite reasonable. I was very slim and fit. And I was subcontractor, you know, I built up the whole Mona Heights, part of that before, and also part where we call, where the race course was, where's New Kingston now.
Yeah.
I live 7 houses there, you know, and it, I remember.
You built
built them on contract, and you finish them, responsible for everything until you hand them over.
Going back to the education, how did you find the education in Jamaica at that time?
The only thing we always learn about in Jamaica is most thing about foreign country. All the book was written mostly by Rudyard Kipling and a few other English writers. And in those books, we were more educated about the European country more than even our own country.
The mother country.
The mother country. There was nothing much there signed by it just brief signed the other rest are Antilles, which tell you about the other small island around Jamaica, just in brief. And they say Antilles and tell you how Columbus captured Jamaica.
So you did a lot of history?
In a way, what we read in school. Yeah. I wasn't a history student, but I retained
what you were taught. Yeah.
So after that period, like, I said to my wife when we was in Kingston, like, I said to her, okay, I'm popping over to England to do, it can't take me more than 6 months to pass my course, because I was kind of high up on top of it. And I said, 6 months to pass my course and work my fare back. I will be back here in a year. So
Or 5.
I come over, and then by the year to done, she keep on writing, and then I was ill. And I remember going to Sino. That time, Sino was ever so terrible over here. When it fall, you usually, and it's all outdoor toilet, so you got to have a kettle. And by the time you pour it in, if you don't flush it immediately, you can't flush the toilet. And
Those were the good old days.
yeah, I come over here in 1960, the ending.
69.
60.
1960. Oh, okay.
And the ending in October, I think. And first, sun was quite high, and I said, okay, it's all right. It took me about 3 years before I start wear tie or any jumper or anything. My shirt and the collar was just open. I just couldn't feel the cold. I remember working outside, and I come in this country in the first half, I couldn't get a job as a builder. So I started work with the railway where we do fire dropping, but I never comfortable. I always feel at home with my trowel in my hand. So anyway, when I go around and ask and say, well, I want to do building work, they say, well, what you can do? I say, I can do bricklaying, I can do plastering, and I also can do carpenter. And they reckon, they say, well, we doing one and we can't do one, so you can't. And I say, well, never mind, give me a chance with my tool. If I don't do the job, don't pay me if it don't satisfy. And I couldn't get a chance. So anyway, I've been working at the railway.
Yeah. How did you find that experience with your skills, how it was appreciated in the West Indies? Did you find that it was more appreciated in the West Indies or than it was in this country, in Wolverhampton?
In the West Indies, when you're a tradesman, you've been respected. Over here, don't care what skill you have. When you come here in the 60s, or early people who come here in 50s, 59 and all them way, none of the skill which you carry is any matter. If you tell them you're a skill, they usually send you go sweep the floor. There's no way a skill, whether you're a school teacher or what it is, they never take into context. So,
What do you think was taken into context more?
Well, they just look on your black and that your job is to go and sweep the floor. Don't care how skilled it is. Because I remember when I working at the railway, it's a labor work to me. Well, soon after, they train me on a thing where you call steam rising and tube blow. So you got to go in the engine when it's 90 degrees to blow the engine. If it's cold, you can't. And I got to do all that. Steam rising is that you got to build the steam up for the engine to ready for the driver. And I usually do enjoy that a bit, footplate staff. But usually £7 a week with 59 hours. So by the time your tax have been taken out, I come home with £5. I usually manage and send money back home out that because my wife and children, and every 2 weeks money go. So it's just one of them things. I share room as well at the same time.
Yes. What status? Let's talk a little bit. So, how did you feel about your status in the West Indies, say Jamaica, where you're from, and your status here in the country? How did you adapt to the difference?
Well, it was very hard because your status become very low and degrading. Thinking about me, have people working for me who is older than me, very skilled man them as carpenter in the West Indies. And I come here working as unskilled laborer and not even anything, it's sweeping the floor sometime and all kind of things. This shed man was the first job I do. So it's sweeping the floor or packing the other thing up. And about 5 of us as young chap, we never want to stay. Matter of fact, there was some of us who eat less just to save the fare back and then go home. And I was doing the same thing as well. But when I decided to start my course, I started on Wilfred College first and do English and other thing. Then I realized that, I couldn't do the corresponding course with Benny College because Sheffield coming like a next world away from England. They're saying you got to go back to the West Indies to do it. And I believe it would be so easy to pass when I come, because I just want to see what this cavity wall was. The Caribbean doesn't have cavity because our wall, we have a split level wall, but not the double cavity to carry Maestro away. We don't have that in the Western.
So why did you think you did not have this opportunity to learn the skills?
Finish the engineer here?
Yes.
The reason why I've known an ex-colleague of mine who was doing building engineer and draftman, and he was working with the bus, and when he passed out, he couldn't get a job, and they tell him that nobody will work with you. You're nearly as good as me. That was the tutor. But the best thing for you, Watson, is to go back to your country. And when they tell him that, he did marry to a European woman, and he find out that it stopped him from promote, and he just packed up and go.
Yeah. So are you saying that your experience here at first when you came was quite negative?
It was very negative. A lot of discrimination was wrong. You usually see a lot of rooms and bed sit, and they say no nigger nor no dogs. So we were probably in the same equation of a dog. And I watched in Jamaica with labor. We kind of most my background is kind of labor, which is equivalent to conservative in this country. So I was intent to kind of pick up and vote conservative when over here, but I just managed to vote once before I leave Jamaica, come here. So it would be my second time for voting here in this country. And I watched Lord Hume one day. At that time he wasn't Lord Hume yet, and he on the telly, and he said he was interviewed.
Do you know what year that was?
No, but I would put it back in it's 67 somewhere, up, or probably a bit earlier. And him and Andre's a thing, and it was Jomo Kenyatta with his men them when Prince Philip go over there.
Yes.
And he said that Jomo should catch and shoot. And Eamon said to him, why? He said, well, let those people with grass skirt come and shake the prince's hand. And he turned to him and said, those are his best soldier, his guard, like how we have our home guard here. And he turned to them and said, Eamon, don't forget, from those bloke leave the midwife, dip them in the tub. They haven't seen water again. And he said, what is it? It's his special royal guardsmen. He said, well, no, those people are semi-human.
That was Lord Hume.
Yeah, and when he said, well, black people are semi-human. And I grew up with dog back home, and he was, and lots of other things, and my dog is quite intelligent. When my father shoot a bird, before the bird even start descend, the dog know and always go off. And if anything was wrong ahead, the dog would change course. Very intelligent dog. And I would look on my dog as a semi-human in his intelligence, call him Hunter. And I sit down and say to myself, you mean the man classify me as a dog? And that, until now, I doesn't vote conservative until now, because of the negative views which European people usually have.
What about the mixture in Jamaica? Because I mean, there was quite a mixture of people, Asians and Chinese and Europeans also. And how was that? How did you all get on?
Well, in Jamaica, the funny thing, because even when I'm building this house in New Kingston, where they call New Kingston now, you have European people, which even one always, I come back to that. He had Nicky Mouse, and he over there, and it's surprising how they change. We have all kind of European in the country. We have German students, them study at the University of Mona, and all the nation you could think of in Jamaica, as to when you're going halfway through. And when you're going halfway through and see people, the color of a person never bother you in Jamaica. We discriminate in Jamaica, but not for color. It's because of the way you behave.
Your character.
And so that's all the discrimination. If you have a an idea which go and steal or robbery, then even the poorest of person seems to discriminate against you, and you would class very unreasonable.
Very low.
We does not value people for your color, and we have Chinese, Japanese, Russian, Jews, Indian, and also European, even Poles. One or a few of them was in Jamaica. And there is nothing, you never see anyone and say, that's a white man or a white woman. The Jews, them usually in Jamaica just go around with the hat and shoulder sell Jeep, broad hat for carry the sun. And
They sell, what did you say?
Jeep hat and tobacco. And tobacco. Jews always just go around and selling that. So they usually be what you would call a local igla in Jamaica. And people always respect them, welcome them, buy if you want. And sometimes they stop and eat at your home. And everybody
So
always one big
Are
family.
you actually saying, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you actually saying that there was no racism in Jamaica?
We haven't got racism in Jamaica. If it's happened since I live there. We doesn't know about racism. We know about we discriminate against a person because of a character, not never for your race. And when I find people, even when I'm working with the local authority, I have my laborer, and the usual practice that the laborer go and knock the door while you're looking at the file. And I experience a lot of discrimination with the people living in council house. And this one was very good. The laborer knocked the door, and he usually knocked because he wasn't a big lad, and he stand behind me. And the woman come out, and as tall as I am, 5 feet, 7, the woman looked over me, continue, and see the little lad at the back and call the little lad and leave me right in front of her and say, come in, and I was just there staring at her. And I watched the joke, and the lad go in, and she said, this is what I want to done, that is what. And the lad say, I am only bucket carrier, he's the operator. And she come back and she say, well, I'm sorry, come in. And when she started to show me what to do, I said, well, look, it's not on the file. So what I got to do is get the inspector to come out. I usually look on it, do it, and tell them. And so that day, I just leave it, and I don't do that job.
Was that because you were just annoyed by the way you were received?
Yes. The fact is that that time I do a course in Kiel and social science and realized behavior pattern quite well.
Yes.
And the moment I see her, and what she was doing, and I never have any remorse, I just smile in the same way, because I know what was going on in her mind. And that's why probably I never do the job. It's not my job to do the inspector job, but to make things easy, I usually phone up and say, well, we have water coming from the ceiling or this.
You could have made things easier for her, but you chose not to be that day because
yes.
You're annoyed.
Not really annoyed. I'm showing her to discriminate.
That's right. What about women in the West Indies? Because we're going backwards and forwards, but were they valued as
well, it's funny to hear. I hear one of my daughters say, women in the West Indies not valued, and I reprimanded her and said, no, not to my knowledge, because in my school we usually have 8 teachers, and there's only 1 male teachers, and all the other rest was women. And I say the majority women in Jamaica are more educated more than men, because the boy usually go to the field with the father, and the girl usually go to school. So in Jamaica, our women is far qualified in education more than all the men. So I don't know where some people get this thing.
But how did it I mean, being married and everything like that, when your wife came, or even other women that you probably mixed with in the community, how did you find their skills and education? How was it valued here compared to
a bit of joke on that, just coming off this point, when you have in Jamaica, the mother we kind of got one family, like. So even
Extended family.
even the stranger, it can reprimand you on the street. If you do whistle and a big man or a big woman was coming and see you, you got to stop before you reach to them, because if they hear, they can either spank you or go and tell your parents that that boy getting out of hand. You know, and so you not have to fear you immediately family like the other adult which you pass, and that due respect always be to adult. And with different children, I mean, teacher usually give to one of you from each different little village, usually be a policeman secretly. And if a child was to hop truck, fling stone, and anything, he would jot it down, and in the morning you would come back and pick it out, and you don't know which one of you is this secret policeman.
Your mother would find
Not the police, the teacher line you up.
Okay.
And you usually got to go to school and stretch your finger out, and they look on it that it clean, and they run pen through your ear and that it have been combed. If not, you got to line up, and you get a spanking for it. So no dirty teeth, no dirty nails. Now you're here, got to comb. And if you're late, your parents always have to give you a letter. And children about abscond from school, that just not only in the West Indies. I don't, it's shocking it can happen here. Because if teacher don't see you come to school, that even the same kid go back and talk that I don't see him to school today. And then they say, what? So it's different from over here. But respect, which many people in this country send their children back to the West Indies until they're about 18 before they take them back, because the discipline which they receive from Jamaica tends lacking in this country, and principle as well. Things might be a little bit changed, but going back to when I was a child, and even my child, I too have 3 of my kids grew up in the West Indies.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and then take them back from my mother, which is 89 and still alive. Bless her.
Yeah, but so are you saying that you found that the education system in Jamaica was more stricter and firmer and more geared towards black education, or what are you saying?
Well, what I noticed in Jamaica, go to college here, and also say go as far to Kiel. The education in this country is more intense and more of a higher grade. But because of the West Indian teacher, I put the onus on the teacher in the West Indies, that because they are more compatible to the children and know the way to lay it on, the children in the West Indies more grab education better than these over here. And I dare say one of the reasons probably for the children them in this country is the same discrimination. I find out, even experience with my 3rd daughter in this country, that there was in Telford at a school, and when I go down, by the time the teacher been flicking over, we was looking at the MAC exam. And I was doing S3R3 at the university, so at that time I was very sharp. Top of the page, boodum, threw it at the bottom. And while he flicked in, I managed to kind of have a, I just get nosy and say, those 2 kids in neck and neck, I wonder if one of them is mine. There was no name, like I never noticed the name. I just look on the ratio and see the marking. And by the time he reached to the end of the page, I find out one of the child drop about 30 mark they only get in the MAC exam, which is the most important one. And I say, why the reason 2 children is actually equal going on in the whole year, and just 1 lesson, how is it that they lose 70%? And the man turned to me and said, how did you see that? I said, what are you on about? He said, first tell me how you see it. And I said, is that true? Who's it? What is the child name? So he half opened the book and closed it back, and he said, are you a scientist or you got X-ray eye or something like that? And he wouldn't tell me. I said, you tell me. He said, no, how you see it? So I said, look, I do S3R3 in Kiel, and we just survey direct, and And he said, oh, But I was flicking the book leaves. So how did you see it? I said, is that the truth? That the ratio? And he turned around and said, well, they finished the work, and she was very disrupting the other rest of class. And that's why I mark her down on it. I said, well, don't you send her out? Don't you give her some other work to do? And why didn't you, I was wonder, even if she was sick, should have gained more credit, more than what you have there. And I turned around and I said, with that mark, she can't even clean the street because she wouldn't know the street name. What are you qualifying? And he turned around and said, oh, Ivan can go to university as well. And I said, I'm not arguing where my child should go. I'm just telling you, if you don't move that, I'm going to report you to the Education Authority. And I mean the Education Authority, not these you got here. Yeah. So the child did done quite well the year, so I believe whether I scrap it or delete it. Plus I have a lot of complaints from other parents that the child seems to be quite reasonable, bright, and they're on the mark by the teacher. I also find out over here that teachers always have a renewed psychology discrimination, the way how they taught black children. All black parents usually say to the little girl or boy, go to school, behave yourself, and do well. And so the child go out with that empathy, and as teacher asks any question, and if the child knows, put their hand up all the while. And what usually happens is that the teacher usually allow that little child to continue, hold their hand up and embarrass. They would pass around them and go to, how are you, Mary? Oh, what do you think is a nice boy, Mary? And they go around. And if they continue to do that to the child for a month, after they ask 2 months, you find the child stop from holding their hand up because the other children, they start laugh. And then all of a sudden, that child wouldn't be take that much interest in the class.
So you said that your children experience racism in the classroom?
Oh yes, definitely. And other children as well experience these kind of things. And it's still go on. It's only parents who really realize it and then go down sometime, have a word with the teacher that my child can do better. And without telling them what you realize, because you dare not mention that they discriminate at that time, they'll turn you and your kids out of the school. But the same thing happened now for me to being involved in some of the education panel. And when I view the ratio with the amount of ratio with black children have been disproportionately expelled from school. And with all them way, and they call it behavior. It isn't behavior that the child fed up because of the way the teacher been psychoanalyzing them. And some of the parents are not aware of what really taking place with the little boy or girl. And when they come and say, well, look, he started to disrupt the class, what you should do is either take your kids and find out, because I have more than 5 kids which they expel from school, and one of them they say that he can't read, he can't count, he can't do nothing. And I bring him down to Arambe one day where we did have some machine, and somebody come and buy something. And I was shocked to see the little boy put everything on that machine and check it up. I was amazed. I go in the office and say to him, pick one of those books and read. And he was a bit shy, and I help him take one up with a little black picture, black girl on it. And he take it out, and I was shocked to see the chap start read. And the teacher say, the reason why he can't come to school is because he can't read, And when I get into the parents, the grandparents, and there was a battle with the child, whether the grandmother should have or the daughter, because she was a bit unstable at the time, been in some matrimonial problem. The social worker seems to take the child and send him to a special school. So there it is again. I would call one child there which was very, very bright, being deprived of a valuable education. And that is not him and his one. I sit on rec committee where I vigiled a lot has gone to the ratio. And I'm sure if you go around and check on the background, It's like John West say, the fish that John West they reject, John West take it and make the best. It is the best children that been chucked out the school them. And I don't believe that the teacher there are not aware.
You think it's the best ones are more disruptive because they're less stimulated?
They're not disrupted. I think the teacher is definitely find out that they were going to be very bright. I have an experience around the grammar school there with a lad was chucked out and punched by the teacher. And I give up my dinner time was to sit with the teacher and the mother. And the assistant teacher, who was a man, also the head teacher, that's the school on Dunkel Street. And that's the few final year before it closed. And he said that the lad always be at the head of everything. And he's a ruler. And I asked him, how do you know that this lad is a ruler? He said, because if it's dinner, he's up there first. And if it's class, he up there first. And if it's out, he up there first. And I said, so what's happened? So he pulled him, take this lad muscle to pull back all the while at the class. He keep on picking him. And the lad must be shook his shoulder. And he punched the lad in the corridor and expelled the lad and that. So when I go and listen to the argument, I turn to him and say, well, I think your duty was to keep children in school and not out on the street. And if you don't replace him back today, you know, you will know about it. So the head teacher was saying, the women, they fed up on him and everybody. I said, not on what you just hear. And unless you want to do something else about it, he don't go home. So I called the mother in, and I called the lad in, and I say, you will start school now. So unfortunately for the teacher, he did start after he was on the street for 3 months, breaking window. So he go back to school. And I got experience with my one lad who teacher, when he want to do computer, the teacher them, he come in and he said, well, Daddy, I never early for the computer class. I usually the last one at the back, and when I get on, it finish, and then by the time, but I always be at the first one for going the woodwork. And I don't want no woodwork, Daddy. I did say to him, be a barrister or a doctor, because I was dabbling law myself. And then he said, I'm not a time man like you. So until he misbehaved in class, and the teacher sent for me to take him out the class and find a school for him, I managed to go down, hear his deeds, talk to the teacher, and I think coming from Kilo was kind of very reasonable. And I said, well, I'm sorry for you trying to get me, because they couldn't trace me. I was working with the local authority. So it's not very easy. You know, I always travel out with a lot of keys, and nobody actually know where I is. It's not good. People will just knock you down and take away people key off them. So it's never been known where I'm is, and he said to me, it's like getting into parliament. I'm sorry to know, I got to get you at work. Anyway, when he get me and I come down, he said I got to take the lad from the school because he break one of the window and he disrupted. So I call the all teacher was there, and I speak to them. I said, well, I'm sorry for your problem, but now I'm aware with it. And there got to be something good why you put up with him this long. And I'm asking you to give him a next chance with me, going to work with you. I use psychology. And
you use it softly.
It's very soft, and I was very economic with the psychology and them. Yeah. And the lads reckon that the year, there was an girl want to do law, and the head teacher said, go and say David Ebert, his father is a barrister, because he reckon if I plead him off,
that's right.
you know.
You can do the same.
So I just finished with that. I helped the lad, and then with the teacher them, and he said to me at the end of the year, what the hell do you do move a boy who was at the bottom of the class, challenging the top boy and nearly beat him in the education? And I turned around and said, it's not me, teacher, it's your good work, you know. So I take the lad out after and send him to a special college, and it's a good thing to do that because he now got about 3 compared to police.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. But going back to the West Indies now, I would just like to ask you a little bit about, single parents. How are they seen in the West Indies, and how were they seen here, in the 1960s?
Well, the single parents in the West Indies, as I said before, in the West Indies, a child belongs to the community in the West Indies. And even though that child is yours, the pattern of the other rest of people always seems to float around that child. So if you're single back home, it's not so hard finance because sometimes they got to work, but they always can stop next door, and that child will be taken as one of the family until when the real parents come. So the child always be happy. And in the West Indies, there's no kind of discrimination, and nobody say, if you don't have manners, they say, look, you got to behave yourself before you come in here, and that's it. And the only child who you find have difficulty in the West Indies is somebody who probably decided to be very unreasonable. And it's
like
1 out of every 100.
I mean, for single parents, and I'm talking about being married. How was it viewed, before having children and so on?
Well, when you're not married in the West Indies, the married woman have a bit more criteria over you as a family. But there's a lot of people live in the West Indies not married and no one know about it because once you is there as a parents and a family, everybody just respect you as man and wife. And sometimes it's very long after before they're doing it before we realize that there was not a married couple legally. But you usually find one man, one woman status like in the West Indies. So it doesn't matter whether you're married or not, you is a man and wife. And that's go.
So you didn't have, it hasn't have to have that open public show?
It's not like over here in one way. It doesn't look on in that way. It's only like, say, one or a few times if it touch into legal matter, sometimes that's when it kind of show up a bit. Because the wife usually have a bit more credible status than the unmarried common law wife.
Yeah, but then the single parents weren't looked down upon if like a single mother.
No. And the man just really always seems to, and the family care for the children just the same way as if you are lawfully. Matter of fact, sometimes in the West Indies, if the real parents cannot cope, then the grandparents usually be there all the while, and most children raised by grandparents in the West Indies, whether you're rich or you're poor. And
how can you compare it to here?
Well, over here, the fact is that everybody here got to work, and your home here is so small, and the difference that grandparents doesn't play the role which the West Indian grandparents play. And that is one of the things for the breaking down of the tradition, black-orientated community, when what we call discipline and manners doesn't instill in children over here because they're that close role model, and that role model isn't there to kind of bounce back. You will find a young boy or a young girl over here, or say a young girl have a child, and she's not at home. It might be some argument with parents because probably she doesn't marry or she expect too early. And then she try to fight with the children, and then she take it and leave with what we call carers, which I have experience with me, my own kids over here with carers. It's not very, very good. The children them not look after, and they doesn't learn anything. And one of what I decide to do, even at the center here, is it was like a childcare facility was here before, but it's to get one kind of base here where not even the child give the parents a break, but the child could be learned from mature people with etiquette to kind of instill,
like a mentor.
Yeah, to instill back a bit what we believe missing out the community. So I'm trying to work on this. We have the elderly group going, men and female, but it's to get that back, and then
You're a busy man, aren't you?
young people actually to create something of a employment at the same time, to have young people would be training, that because the elderly person have a lot of esteem, even though they wouldn't fit to go through what you'd call pass a GC or a A-level education here. But what community need as a community orientated base, that's what lacking. And I think I did ask one of the chap from Home Office at Civic Center that when we come here in the 60s, is very few of us ever have any problem with the law. Yet we are in this country which is more prevalent and the mother country, and now we and our children are top the ratio with the amount of criminal and people who is in jail. How can he answer that? And he never answered. And I say, I'm sorry, probably my English is not quite fluently and he doesn't understand me. I will repeat again. And he said, no, Mr. Hibbert, you get coming over quite loud and clear. But I can't answer that question. You got to write to the Home Office. And that to show, the inward, because a lot of our people is in jail, which is not because they commit a crime. The only crime they commit is the pigment of their skin. And people like myself and others try to change this by liaison with the police them. And they realize now there is what we call, what was it they reckon with Stephen Lawrence? Is what kind of discrimination they reckon it was?
Racial discrimination.
No, it's racial, but they call it like, it's Stephen Lawrence, what did they say it was? Institutional racism. And many people try to get away from the fact, but it is from the school right back to the employment. And the problem which our youngsters have is that the way they've been handled at school, they come out on the street and they handle the same way. They go to a job and they handle in the same discriminated way. And when they meet back with the police, this is why sometimes the way the police try to arrest them, the police actually commit a crime by saying, using swear word, handle them also inferior. And they seems to always resent it. And that's most of the time why the police have to always blow the whistle and then take them in, because you doesn't submit enough as how he would realize you should submit. Now, most of those children were born in this country and they believe that they do have a right here. So at the same time, they actually answer proudly, in a proud way, because they believe they don't know what the police would be have in mind. The police look on them and say, well, you're black. And he's saying, I belongs here. So he's quite proud of his identity. And he answer you as a proud Englishman should be. But because of that, he caught into prison and he go inside there and the judge just say, well, you come here, the police know that you're guilty, you're black, and I'm sentencing you. And which isn't even the judge now on that grounds, but it's very slow. Because my point's in that, why should taxpayer pay? Doesn't matter whether you're black and white, as taxpayer pay to keep an innocent person in jail, when that person should be out there working for themselves and also to build the society a bit more. And it's a very shame to know that police sometimes have people beyond bar and the judge have to sentence them because of what we call trump up charge, and let them go in to learn about criminal to come back out in the society to spread what they did not know about before. And these are the evil which face a lot of black youngsters in this country.
Mr. Hibbert, I think you've, I really think that you've missed your place in society, because really you should have been a politician, shouldn't you?
I do learn. I dropped out because there are certain grounds I wouldn't cover.
Yeah. Going back, I'm going to take you back to the West Indies again. you know, on.
Should I just finish on this
Yes,
topic
yes,
with the single
yes.
mother in this
Carry on,
country?
yes.
Single parents in this country, the only one thing which I do, I notice one thing is that the youngster them always seems to have, like, get one girl pregnant, the next girl pregnant, and then they reckon and say, well, you are number one and you are number two. We couldn't do that when we in the West Indies. If you have a woman outside, you got to keep it quiet. Nobody can know about it. And I think the young men are getting away with that, and because of that, they're leaving the children in a worse state than where they was, because there's no father role model. You cannot be at two houses at the same time, and most time is when time the children them need you best. So I definitely don't like that, and wouldn't mind if the young men them could improve on that, to realize that the woman does not give herself a child, and people like me usually say the child is mine. I give it to the woman, and the woman carry it for 9 months and then give it back to the world. And most mother, when time they just deliver, between the time of delivering or even nearly to deliver, coming up to about 2 years, they're very ignorant. And men doesn't understand that it's the gene in them of that protection. They got to protect the young one which coming along. And even if you are,
You mean they get cross? The
they
women
get very cross, and there seems to be a guide that child, and it's natural that they have to do that. And you find many young men and their mistress or the wife have a fuss at that time. But it's the same woman who love you. There's nothing. It's only that her gene build up in that way that she got to protect that young child until she believed that it all right. And so when your wife been crossing her, say, don't touch the baby, it's not because she don't like you. It's the mother instinct. But single mother here, they have it very hard, because if they are to go out, they have no one like to leave the child with, like how somebody would leave the child easy with a person back home and know that that child is safe. Over here, you got to fret for people being interfere with your children, and you got to fret for people come and molesting your child and all them way, which you know, those things wasn't aware in the West Indies. So single parents here are very discriminated, and they have it very hard than single parents in the West Indies. More financial, better off, but in an unstable more position.
Yeah, true. What about your early smells in the West Indies? Okay, you're living in this country now, and when you were in the 60s, when you came here in the 60s, I'm sure that you missed Jamaica a lot, didn't you? What smells can you sort of elaborate on now that reminded you of back home?
The thing is this, that many, as I say, when we come here, I didn't know I was going to stop here longer than a year, you know, because everything and the black smoke and everything like that, you know, it really put you off, and all the way the house they stay, and when the fog come down, it so stink. Plus, you know, all the house them resemble a factory. We saw, you know, most of us, as we say, 6 months, but if what's happened after I sick, my wife joined me. So my 6 months turned into what, nearly 40 years. And with the smell here, after it's the first time I could remember empty my lungs very good is when my daughter was working down London, and at outskirts of London, I think she said Harry C come have a place nearby there. I forget where the place was, but she was working on a project out there, and I go there and I see water running stream, quite clean like the West Indies, trees, and then we cross over a bridge over the water, just like in the West Indies. And you know, I say to her, it's the first time I empty my lungs. So yeah, you know, you take a deep fresh breath and you smell the real creation, you know, Mother Earth. You smell the freshness and everything. And like when I went back to the West Indies, I usually enjoy that quite well, you know. Less cultivation is in the West Indies now and when I'm there, but is when you go there and breathe, even the air itself is like a tonic. And the West Indies is quite good in a way because
What about food smells? You know?
oh well,
You look
food
like
in
a man who
the
love your
yeah, food in the West Indies. The first thing, the fish smell different. The egg, even that plenty people are doing poultry now, just like over here. But the tasting of food and everything is quite so different to over here. Because our meat in the West Indies, for argument's sake, it kill in the morning and it sell off by midday. That's the way. Nobody usually store things, so you get things fresh. And now is that the world changed around kind of different. But even a chicken in the West Indies tastes different to this chicken over here.
So so the smells, does it, as you say, it relaxes you, it makes you feel at home when you go there.
All right. To go back there, and when you walk amongst the trees then, and you go down to the sea, well, to be honest, I go back there and spend, what was it, 11 months, and I put about 20 years on my life. I was so peony up, after I have an accident, and I hardly could walk. I was having stick, and I went there and then no stick.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Well, I noticed that you're a very sharp character. You like to look smart. You like it. How was the fashion then in the 60s?
Well, I in the fashion in the 60s, like the fashion to know, it's quite different because the way you usually dress, it's like different. And the fact is as well that when you really, I don't know if you others people, but when I leave the West Indies, it take about 3 years before I could really feel the real cold over here. I think it's what I notice is that the longer you're in this country, your blood curdle and become dark. And that is the reason for you to manage the cold. In the West Indies, your blood are very, very thin and more is red. You see some, like if you get a cut in the West Indies, your blood thin and red. And I noticed even over here, even when I was there the other day, saying about 3 years ago, after a while, my blood start to get thin back. And after when you come back here, your blood start get thick back to acclimatize again to the cold. So it's a different way of life as well, and you tends to feel painless.
Yeah. What about the snappy dresses in Jamaica? I know that they look very smart in the 60s.
In Jamaica and even now, the clothes which you wear over there, like most of women over here are covered with clothes. The figure which people cut in the West Indies because you have less clothes. And therefore you can see the shape of the person.
You're talking about women now?
Women and men as well. The tailor and the dressmaker, they make the thing to fit like. But over here, you go and buy something which seems to you can wear. But in the West Indies, you seems to dress more better.
Were people more fussy about what they wear?
They're definitely fussy in the West Indies, even now, more than over here. They're definitely fussy with maggots and different things, clothes out of season. Over here, my clothes never out of season. In the West Indies, in the West Indies, they're quite different. Even when I go over there, my wife said, well, you can't wear those here. And you can wear some English suit over there, but you got to pick or get them.
So you mean you have to be up in fashion when you're?
Yeah, you do. If not,
even in the 60s.
Yeah, even in the 60s, yeah, definitely. People, we usually learn in the West Indies that cleanliness is next to godliness. So it doesn't mind whether even the one you have, it's usually very clean. You got children going to school and they come home and they wash their socks and it ready for school the next morning. But they go to school shine. Always have to be clean.
Yeah. What about special dates and events that you celebrate in the West Indies and you sort of keep it up in this country? What sort of special events?
Well, Christmas in the West Indies is still better than Christmas here.
Why do you say that?
The simple reason, when it come on to Christmas time in the West Indies, all the trees in flowers. So if you go in the West Indies and you wake up early, it's always be a beauty to wake up in the morning because all the trees them are in full blooms and the air always around with aroma. So it's lovely before the sun come on it. And all the cane them and everything like in arrows. So the whole place is kind of pretty and start let you know it's Christmas. All trees in bloom. So that is where it is. And also when you come on to people enjoy themselves. When you come on to Christmas, you know, you doesn't sleep. Over here, well, you know, whether you want to or not, the places are not open for you to go and explode. Or it's so cold that you got to keep home.
What about the Christian aspect of Christmas? How do you find the difference?
Right. We usually practice very hard when it comes on to Christmas. As I grew up in a choir, my father was Anglican deacon, and then I become Anglican until now I'm a Catholic. So we usually practice hard to sing when it comes on to choir in the Christmas and carol. And everybody always seems to, when you come on to Christmas Day, you know, you put on your Christmas best and you're gone to church. Even people sometimes who doesn't visit church often, Christmas days and sometime New Year and harvest, you know, people celebrate that. And first of April, Tomfool Day has gone to them back home. Because they reckon, I think it's the day the slave get freedom in Jamaica. So that is a day which some people always kill either the best chicken or the best pig or the best goat or sometimes cows and share it, you know, sometime between families. So when you come on to April and August, there are festival days in the West Indies.
Yeah.
And one good thing in the West Indies as well, even all in Easter, you find the people them who are not very worse off in the district usually bake, you know, whether they bake it themselves or they employ somebody to bake it, and then they send bread or bun around to all the other rest of people them. And then probably if they kill a cow, they would send a little piece of the meat around to give Miss Lies, Miss that. And when I'm coming from bush sometime, not Christmas alone, even though I usually sell milk coming up sometime to on my way to go to school from bush, you'll find some people come out and they will buy one gill of milk and you give them two because, you know, they're poor. And then you usually give them breadfruit, coconut, yam, and things. People is quite
So community
giving.
spirit was very good.
Very high in the West Indies to hear. You know, if you ask for anything, no problem. People just give it to you. Now I'm not quite sure it's probably so easy because less cultivation around probably.
Yeah.
But people usually live very, what you call, community-wise in the West Indies. And the young people are always very respectable when they come on to adult. You know, you don't care who the person is. Once it's an adult, don't care if you're even fighting and they come in, you stop. And if you're swearing, you always either say you're sorry and then walk off. Sometimes you have to before they even say anything to you.
Yeah. So a value system was very
Oh
different.
yes, the values just up on a high, which I wish we could instill some of that in England.
Yeah. We went through quite a bit, Mr. Herbert. Could you tell me, you know, about your family, you know, and you touched on it before. I mean, like your mother and father in the West Indies, the things they used to do, like you know, we learned a lot about herbal medicines and so forth. You know, people didn't visit the doctors very regularly in Jamaica, but they used to get sick. How you know? Could you tell me a little bit about it, because I've heard so much about it.
Yeah. How long we have?
10 minutes.
All right. Herbal medicine in the West Indies, as I say, West Indies is, there's a lot of things to do with herbal medicine, and people like me even now still doesn't interested in conventional medicine that much. I still use herb a lot. And
Ganja.
no, not ganja. Ganja have its place, but not the way how people use it. And ganja always have to mix with about 3 other bush or 5 bush to become compatible. It can cure a lot of disease. And it can also applicable to a lot of other complaint. In the West Indies, we have some little bush, they call them shema maka. If you step on them, you know, they close up. And they are very, very good for blood pressure. And even the fallen breadfruit leaf and the sword is very, very good. Iron deficiency, banana sword, and things like that. So in the West Indies, everything nearly, even deadly nightshade, have a time in the West Indies when it can cure the worst illness. So in the West Indies, even though people's there still pushing drugs, which I would say the people who go around the doctor. You know, I met a nice, beautiful lady when I was out there 3 years ago, and I said, "What do you do?" And she have this briefcase, and she said, "Well, I go around to the doctors them and I introduce medicine." And I said, "You mean a beautiful woman or you are a drug pusher?" And she laughed. She must admit it. I never think of it that way, but yes. You know, and
so that the homegrown remedies were more sought after than conventional medicine.
It was, and it's more compatible to Afro-Caribbean as well in the West Indies, and not Afro-Caribbean at all. But the bush them in the West Indies, for argument's sake, when you have plants which is compound leaf and some are single leaf, and they both differently that take their food or start from the sun or from the moon. Now, when you know which is which, then you start looking to them towards which one you're going to use to give to people with different illness. For instance, when you have when a woman have baby back home, they usually spend 9 days in room, and that means neither the father enter that room hardly. It's only the midwife and the mother and baby 9 days before they come out. And the midwife usually come every morning with a different bungalow bush. And they usually have the lady to sweat and steam in the room over it. And if you think back how helpful it is with a hot country which never hardly less than 60 degrees, with disease and the healthy people which come from the West Indies, which people like me say, well, the West Indies people are very healthy because the heat of the country, whatsoever, if you have disease, you just don't survive. So the people who are survive is very, very fit and healthy. And most of the time over here, we drop like flies because of the changes and the way our body react to germs in this country, which you are not compatible with it in the West Indies. So when it come on to your body to cloak what you call disease, it not that very good to cloak it because of the heat. It's breed it quick. If you have anything die in the West Indies, by midday it start rigor mortis setting and it start spoil, which over here sometimes you can die for 6 months and probably nobody smell it. So it's different with how one body cope with disease. Some West Indies people really body are more compatible with herbal medicine more than things, because going back to the mothers who have baby, you never find no much venereal disease or illness in that country because of the
venereal
skill
disease
of the midwife them.
But I mean, venereal disease would like that's a social thing. So, you know,
It's social, but it hardly been in the West Indies. If you have it, your class as out class, and it's very few people who run around. Usually, seems to be have it.
That's it.
You know, it's not a very widespread disease in the West Indies. The most thing where people have something like malaria because of the mosquitoes, and that is more than one thing. Also, is the way they go there and spray, and the spray breed insect with other different bacteria come onto the people. So there's a lot of things need to look on how people have disease. But the plants in the West Indies in a whole are very compatible to Afro-Caribbean people.
Yeah. Ms. David, you've given me so much information. It's going to take such a while to sort of sort it all out. You know, you've taken me from you know, your early experiences of you know, your early memories in the West Indies, and you came from the West Indies to England. You went back to the West Indies. You came back to England, and everything comparing, and a lot of it is saying that really that you had preferred things how they used to be in the West Indies, and you wish it had carried on when you came over here.
That's true. I think it's a poor lover doesn't fancy back home. Poor live. And the wife of that, I'm sorry that I never prepared for this interview. So therefore, that's why, you know, probably seems to not really quite close.
No.
Had I prepared, I think you could get a lot more from even slavery, a bit how they pass it on to us.
There's more time.
Okay. Because they pass on a lot how slavery developed and how they managed to cope through a lot of things.
Another time.